Welcome to our webinar series on global higher education. My name is Anatoly Alexienko. Today we'll look at the possibilities and challenges of GenAI technology in higher education. AI is increasingly capable to create advanced text sorts and solutions that resemble human creativity. And as educators, we can be increasingly uncertain to tell the difference between a student's real effort and the work created by artificial intelligence. And moreover, as AI tools become easier to access, I guess we experience the challenge of fairness in assessment. So, how can we make sure that everyone is assessed fairly in different learning environments with different capabilities to acquire those sophisticated tools and so on? So, and most importantly, I think, what are the best ways to increase assessment methods that not only measure what students learn, but also probably encourage their critical thinking, creativity, and responsible use of technology. So there are many difficult questions that we currently address in the field of higher education, in classrooms, in different environments. And today with me is our fellow, Dr. LUO Jiahui Jess. She is assistant professor in the Faculty of Education and Human Development and Department of Education Policy and Leadership. And we conduct this webinar in co-sponsorship with the Consortium of Higher Education Research in Europe and the Center for Higher Education Leadership and Policy Studies, which is an important vehicle for these global higher education webinars. So, Jess, you have been spending so much time looking into this kind of the most exciting development and disconcerting type of development, let us say. So, without further ado, let us listen to what you find in your most recent studies, and then we can probably follow up with some comments, questions after your presentation. I ask our audience to keep your microphones on mute for a while, and then we will invite you for Q&A. Thank you. Jess, the virtual floor is yours.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Anatoly, for having me and then for the very lovely introduction. And hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon to all of you. I see some of my friends and colleagues in the audience as well. And thank you so much for joining me in today's webinar. So in today's talk, I want to share a little bit of my thinking and then some of my recent research about evaluating student work in the GenAI era. And especially, I want to focus on the concept of originality, i.e., what do we mean by students' original work and how can we define originality in this GenAI age? All right. Here, I want to start today's presentation by sharing a few screenshots. Well, here you can see a few documents, right? Usually these are known as the AI declaration form, where students before submitting their assignments, they need to declare on these forms that yes, I have or have not used AI, and that in different ways. Well, this is almost a common practice now in Hong Kong higher education institutions, and I believe globally as well. These forms, well, they look very clean, very organized, right? Very innocuous. But if we take a closer look at these forms, as I highlighted for you in these red columns, we can see a recurring emphasis for students to produce their original work or their own work. As we can see in the yellow highlight here, if you use AI to assist in your assignment, please clearly distinguish it from your original work. So we see there's a very strong emphasis, expectation that students should distinguish their original work from the AI-assisted content. Well, actually, this whole emphasis on originality is not new in higher education, right? I remember like many years ago when I did my undergraduate thesis, I've signed something very similar to this statement, as we can see on the screen, the declaration of my thesis originality. I need to declare that, hey, yes, this thesis, this is my original work. This is my independent work done with my own efforts, blah, blah, blah. And here we see another picture of Turnitin. We're all very familiar with Turnitin in higher education. But actually, every time when it scans a student's work, it produces a report. And that particular report is called the originality report. I guess there are many important reasons for these emphasis on originality, accountability, academic integrity, et cetera, et cetera. But as AI becomes, more powerful and is increasingly shaping students' work progress, I couldn't help but wonder one question. So yeah, we've been telling students, yes, you need to produce original work, you need to have original thinking. We talk about this like every day. It's in our policies, is in our student handbook. But what exactly do we mean by original work? And especially, how is original work currently framed and understood in relation to AI use? So with this question in mind, I recently did a critical AI policy review that looked at the AI assessment policy of 20 leading universities worldwide. Idro and Carol Baki's was the problem represented to be framework. And then this paper mainly aimed to address how these problems are framed in the policies and what are some of the assumptions underlying these policies. It's a very long paper, but one of my major findings is that the primary problem represented is that the students may not submit original work for assessment in the AI age. And in the current policy framing, AI is often viewed as a type of external assistance that's separate from the students' independent efforts or intellectual contribution. So in our database, we found quite a few instances where the policies imply a clear distinction between AI-generated text and original text. For example, on the right-hand side, we can see that University 20, when it discusses the capability of these detectors, is that differentiate between ChatGPT text and text that is actually original. So we see like this is like a contrast here. And we've also identified quite a few instances where the use of AI is treated no differently from outsourcing the coursework to a third party. We see here the example from University 05. Use or even consultation with GenAI shall be treated analogously to assistance from another person. So in this paper, the data tell us two things. One is by original work, there seems to be an implication in our current policies that this refers to students' work produced by themselves without the assistance of AI or others. So we see like producing original work and using AI, so like positioned as two things in conflict. And the second thing is the originality of students' work is mainly framed as a concern of cheating or academic misconduct. Like, hey, if your work has been somehow tampered with by AI, this is not your original work. This could constitute a severe violation of academic integrity. It's not just about the policy languages. If we think about how we talk about original work, think about our practices and beliefs in education, we can find very similar understandings of how original work is understood and positioned as well. For example, there's an emerging line of research that are revealing that students often hesitate to admit their AI use. They are very concerned that this would undermine the perceived originality of their work. And we'll come back to these studies later. And regarding teachers, one of my recent paper, we found that some university teachers, they tended to award higher grades to students who did not use any AI compared to those who disclose its use in their work. I can elaborate a little bit more on this paper. It's a paper about teachers' value judgments in grading. So what we did was that we presented with these teachers with a few wicked grading scenarios involving student work graded with and without AI assistance. So in one scenario, two students' coursework is believed to demonstrate equally high quality, but one openly declared using AI for assistance, but the other completed the work without any AI involvement. So what was very interesting was that at the beginning of a lot of these interviews, the teachers mentioned, yeah, I'm very open to the use of AI. I recognize this trend that AI literacy will become very important in the future. But when it comes to the actual grading, some teachers still instinctively rank the coursework without any AI involvement higher, viewing it as a reflection of greater independence, originality, and capability. As we can see from the pink sticker here, teacher SL, she said, well, if the two assignments demonstrate the same quality, but B can independently complete it without AI, doesn't this show that student B is more capable and then deserving a higher grade? So we see this understanding of originality is very entrenched in our assessment beliefs and practices as well. So based on these studies and the policy review study, it seems that students' work without any AI involvement is often considered more original and hence more aligned with the values underpinning academic integrity. And you can see that I'm putting a big question mark here. Is such understanding problematic? And why? I feel we might have a better understanding of this when we navigate question number 2. Is it feasible to clearly separate original work and AI use? My argument is that the notion that students' use of AI is separate from their independent efforts and original work is predicated on a simplistic assumption that students, they simply copy and paste AI-generated content into their assignments and pass it off as their own. However, in another of my recent study, we traced some university students over one semester, and then we look at their authentic dialogues with AI to how they use AI to support their assignments under unsupervised settings. And then when we look at their actual check data with AI, and then also with follow-up interviews, we found that a portion of students, they were able to conduct really extended dialogues with AI over multiple iterations. It really shows that they have strong metacognitive regulation and agency as they guided AI's output towards their desired direction. What this means is that when we look at their chat record, there is a lot of their own thinking injected into their prompts. For example, I don't agree with your responses. Could you sharpen this part for me? Could you make this part more elaborated? Could you sharpen this language? So there's a lot of thinking. There's a lot of self-direction when you look at the actual chat record. Well, it's not just my study. There's another AI in higher education study of a broader scale in Australia. And they've surveyed over 8,000 students, and then also, if I remember that correctly, over 20 focus group interviews in Australia. So one of their initial findings is that the assumption that all students are using AI in the same way not only oversimplifies their choices, but risks missing the nuanced support that they might actually need. So we can see that from this larger scale project, it also shows that, well, it might be over simplicity if we just think that students are copying and pasting the AI-generated output into their assignments. However, many universities require students to clearly distinguish their original work from the AI-assisted content, as exemplified by the policies and by the declaration forms. So from this perspective, such requirements are not only difficult to achieve, but may also be unreasonable or even misleading. Because ironically, if students, they can make such distinctions, I can tell you this part is AI generated content, this part is my content. It might suggest that their use of AI lacks the iterative agentic engagement that characterizes more sophisticated AI use. I'm asking this question, is it feasible? Because I noted that even long before this recent hype around GenAI, some scholars, they pointed out that nothing is wholly original, because we as humans, we think and write by remixing and reusing the past. We add to or remake O+, insights and ideas. And if we look at the literature on academic writing, like long before this hype around generative AI, there are also more radical arguments saying that any attempt at originality would involve navigating and borrowing from the existing voices in society. Ideas are inevitably shaped by the environment that we're part of and the experiences we have had. So in the rise of GenAI, obviously, this has further complicated the process of producing original work. And there is this editorial from Sarah Eaton at the Calgary University at Canada. I like this editorial a lot. What she has proposed is that we have entered a post-plagiarism era where advanced technologies, they have become a normal part of our life, including how we teach, how we learn, how we communicate, and how we interact on a daily basis. And in this editorial, she has proposed a post-plagiarism framework that constitutes 6 different tenets, as we can see here on the slide. And actually, the first tenet of this post-plagiarism framework was that hybrid human AI writing will become normal. Sarah continued to write that AI-generated texts are not static, but are often edited, revised, reworked, and remixed by human, making it sometimes really difficult to draw the line between human and AI contributions. So we see in the highlighted quote here, she said, the result can be a product that's neither fully written by human nor by an AI, but one that is hybrid, trying to determine where the human ends and where the AI begins could be pointless. So, and then I started to think, well, if it is not feasible, then is it desirable if we emphasize originality as purely human work without any AI involvement? Here on the screen, we see a quote from Thompson and colleagues. I think that's very well said. They mentioned, we tend to hold authors to the same standards of originality and authenticity, often without considering the significant impact that technology has on the creative process. So when we think about original work in the GenAI age, well, traditional views, as we can see from the policy documents in our heads, the assessment beliefs and perceptions, originality is often perceived merely as a product of individual genius. But this might have arguably become less relevant in the present age, where we know that knowledge production has become increasingly AI-mediated, collaborative, and distributed. So the current framing of AI as a threat to students' original work, albeit often implicit, does not serve students well as they prepare for a career where skills to use AI are important and valued. However, we say when we talk about higher education, of course, it's not just about employability. Beyond these concerns of employability, the narrow conception might also impact how students engage with their learning as well. Here on the slides, I show a screenshot of a company. I don't know if any of you have heard about similar services before this website. Any ideas? Is this familiar with you, or is this new information? And Anatoly was like, yes and no. I wasn't aware of this website, these services, until one of my student participants in my research told me about this. What this is that these are companies, they have launched AI humanizer tools, which purported to use AI to help students revise their text to appear more human-like. So you can hear the sarcasm here. So basically, the students, when they get worried that their writing might not be perceived as original by their teachers, and then there were services provided by these AI software companies as well as professionals claiming that, hey, I can help you make your text look more original and get higher grades. I think what's a little bit sad is that the students, they were telling me that these tools have become quite popular among the students as a way to ensure that their work is perceived as original, which we can see that really reflects and reinforces a very superficial standard of originality. And perhaps a more disturbing reality is that the students reported ending up spending more time ensuring their work is not flagged by AI detector as unoriginal, rather than really meaningfully engaging in their learning and assignments. So we see there's a issue of students faking or performing original work in this process. We've kind of talked about this earlier. So along these lines, there's an emerging body of research showing that there's a growing sense of anxiety among students about AI use in their coursework for assessment. Chana, based in the UK, she's done a wonderful paper, very interesting, on students' non-compliance in AI use. And when we look at the quotes from her student interviews, we can see, a lot of fears and concern that, well, what if the teachers, they judge me harshly for not doing the work myself, or for considering my work as not original? And I've also had very similar student quotes and findings from my own research, although the research itself was not on the topic of originality. But the shared finding with China study is that there's an implied hierarchy among students as well. They think that work that is thoroughly human is understood to be more original and valued, whereas AI collaborative work, yeah, they may be useful, but they are like less authentic. And on the teacher's side, me and two other colleagues from EPL, we have reviewed some Reddit posts about teachers' assessment experiences. And we found the teachers were quite bothered about this as well. They were so, worried that they are forced into the role of AI police rather than educators fulfilling the role to really nurture and guide students' learning. So we see here there's a stigma around the use of AI. So students who use GenAI under this environment, under this very narrow conception of originality, they could be stigmatized regardless of how they use it. They could be perceived as less independent, less ethical, less capable. And in our study, we also found that many students, they intentionally refuse to use AI in their assignments or to engage with AI at all in their learning. So here, the question is, well, yeah, that's a tricky problem, and then is there a clear line once crossed that will render students' work no longer original? And what factors can we as researchers, teachers, providers of higher education prioritize when defining originality in students' work? So finally, I want to share some pathways forward. These are not very mature suggestions, only some of my musing regarding how we can navigate this landscape. The first thing I want to mention is about the ingrained value orientation towards originality and the AI shaming phenomenon. Here on the screen, on the left-hand side, we can see an old man, right? He's writing alone, in a small room individually. Almost a decade ago, Johnson, Ilola, and Sauber, when they talk about defining original work in writing, they said there's an implied hierarchy, that the best of a writer's work is always associated with the idea of a lone genius in the attic slaving away on a piece of written work. And then these values we just talked about that's associated with originality, like individualism, the notion of a genius, the personal wit, were established during a time when human effort was the sole driver of intellectual production. I'm not a historian, but I could share a little bit of information on this, how our modern understanding of original work has been formed. The 18th century is a pivotal, very important period where the broader economic and socio-cultural changes has significantly shaped our current understanding of originality. especially the Copyright Act. For the first time, the authors, they were granted the legal ownership of their work, whereas the rights of the booksellers, the publishers, they were limited by the act. So by explicitly recognizing authors as the original holders of rights to their work, the act connected originality to the concept of intellectual property and transformed authors into independent agents in the literary marketplace. Johnson and Claren very nicely summarized it and said, authors are regarded as originators of commodities or texts which have economic value and thus are seen as the owners of these texts in law. So we can see this connection between original work and individualism. Around the same time, there were some changing views in the literary field, also contributed to this evolving idea of originality. There's a very influential essay, Conjectures on Original Composition by Edward Young. He made a powerful case of originality in a time when the imitation of classic work was regarded as a norm for artists. So what Young said was that he located the source of originality in the writer's innate genius and championed that originality is about creating entirely new ideas. So in what follows, and we can see there are a lot of efforts to systematically analyze and quantify writing styles between different authors, and then further reinforcing this connection between originality and individualism. I think Bialystock summarized it very well. He said that originality, this understanding, is predicated on the metaphysical philosophy about the separateness of individuals, their thinking, their minds. An original idea can only be credited if we accept that my brain is separate from your brain, and each brain thinks for itself. And Bialystock continued to argue that, well, when it comes to technology, it's also often positioned as the enemy of originality because this metaphysical separation between humans and independent thinkers extend to this assumed separation between humans and computers. So this also echoes with our policy review that I just talked about earlier. The use of AI is often seen as completely separate from the students' independent contribution. So that's about some value orientations underpinning original work. And also there are, traditional value underpinnings surrounding the role or the use of new technology. LUO Jiahui, he wrote about the AI shaming phenomenon, defining it as the phenomenon of dismissing the validity or authenticity of AI-assisted work, suggesting that using AI is deceitful, lazy, or less valuable than human only. So this reflects a deep-seated anxiety and moral dilemmas that arise whenever a powerful new technology challenges established norms and values. So as universities develop into intellectual centers of knowledge production, all these historical traditional values placed on originality somehow carry into our structures of teaching, learning, and assessment. And Johnson, Ailola, and Salberg, they found that, well, in 2007, some students intentionally avoid making any attribution to source text because they're so worried that, well, if I make these references, would that make my work look less original? So we see these traditional values, they really heavily influence what is perceived as good, what is perceived as original work, and also our public perceptions as well. So as a pathway forward, I would say that these values are widely reflected in our policies and evaluation and beliefs, but are not yet sufficiently discussed and critically examined. And I would argue that if these value orientations remain implicit, they will continue to reinforce these traditional assumptions of originality that may no longer fully applied or be desirable. And my second point is about reconsidering originality through the lens of validity. When I talk about this topic, there's a tension and I get a lot of questions. Well, yes, Jess, you said we need to recognize the role of AI, and then what about academic integrity? So when does the use of AI compromise original work and when it does not? And when can students claim this is their original work and when they can't? This is like very difficult questions to grapple with. I found this paper by Philip Dawson and a few colleagues at Deakin University really helpful. What they talk about was that to address these difficult questions through the lens of validity in assessment. So when we think about these difficult questions, we need to think about what our assessment is intended to assess. For example, from the perspective of validity, the use of AI could compromise the originality of a student's work if it prevents the student from demonstrating the outcomes the assessment is designed to measure. For example, if we look at an English writing course, a lecturer may not consider a student's work to be original if AI was used for language polishing, because this interferes with what is considered the student's original and authentic contribution to that assignment. But in other courses, for example, in a digital innovation courses, would perfect language writing be a core part of original contribution? So that's a question mark here. By foregrounding the importance of assessment validity, I also want to recognize that scholars in other disciplines, they might have different opinions, for example, from the perspective of intellectual property. Moriarty and Wilson, they summarize a rigid academic integrity policy prioritizing originality above all else without considering the nuances of context and learning objective is both ineffective and uninformed. I think that kind of echoes what we mentioned and what we highlight as prioritizing the validity of assessment in the previous slides. And my final point is about redirecting the discourse around originality from a police, catch, punish focus to supporting student development. We talk about a lot of studies and then we use a lot of different cases in our previous slides. And we can see that there's quite a punitive approach where AI use is considered as a threat to students' original work. And also when we talk about original work, it's often in an academic integrity, misconduct, student cheating kind of context. Krem and McKenna in their paper published in, I think, Teaching in Higher Education about the role and meaning of higher education, they said AI is often understood as an existential threat to higher education. This perception stems from an instrumentalist paradigm that says the institution's main goal is selling qualifications and must be quality safeguarded against forgeries. So of course, when we talk about originality, when we have all these emphasis on academic integrity, there is merit in maintaining accountability and assessment security. But an overemphasis of this often also has unintended consequences on student learning, as we can see the fear of experimenting with AI use, the excessive time spending, in different kinds of softwares and even professional services to ensure that their work is not flagged as cheating, distrust towards teachers, so on and so forth. So moving forward, I think it would be helpful if we could have more inclusive language use in our policy text rather than adopting an overly punitive approach when we talk about assessment and when we talk about the use of AI. Also, I think it would be helpful to showcase more successful examples of student work that exemplifies originality and responsible AI use. And of course, finally, to have more diverse assessment tasks that allows for different pathways for students to create and showcase their originality rather than having essay as the single sole method of assignments. Finally, I think reorienting originality towards supporting student development is not about abandoning accountability, but about reapproaching it in a way that emphasizes learning and innovation over surveillance. Here, some shameless self-advertisement, I put down some QR codes that link directly to some of the papers that I mentioned earlier. And I think most of them are open access. If you're interested in any of these papers, feel free to take a photo of this slide, or if you don't have institutional access to any of them, just email me and let me know. Finally, I want to acknowledge the Hong Kong RGC Council for supporting my work, and then the Startup Research Grant from EduHK and our EPL Research Program support scheme for their wonderful funding so that enable these papers of research that were mentioned in this presentation to be possible. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Jess. You raised so many important questions. I believe the participants will also ask you some questions uh, before they prepare questions, either in chat room, or maybe if anyone wants to raise their hand and volunteer to ask questions, please feel free to do so. Let me just probably use this opportunity and tell you a little bit kind of like a story. Okay, so one of the students approached me and asked if they can kind of use AI in their work, in their essay, a final essay. And I said, yeah, I guess you can, the university allows us to use the AI and you can use it, but I will also use AI to assess your work. And the student said, wow, okay. So the student was surprised that I can use AI to assess their work. So they would expect them to be using AI for developing an essay, but they would expect me to read this essay as a human agent rather than artificial intelligence, right? So let me just kind of take you this question in terms of how it takes the two participants, the teacher and the student, in this kind of learning process uh, toward using AI, right? Just so that we engage in some meaningful conversation with each other, uh,
Mm,
but not without kind of going into the direction where we would uh, make machines talk to each other and say, the machines develop, machines assess, and machines pretty much talk to each other while we pretty much perform the job of these kind of traditional assessments as we thought about them before, right? Just that the student would do this original work, the teacher would make a fair assessment of that particular work, right? So what is the way for us really just to stay engaged humanely, or be human beings within the processes of learning? Because I see assessment and evaluation as a learning process as well. So from that point of view, where do you see uh, opportunities and challenges at the same time?
Thank you, Anatoly, for your sharing. And then I think this is a very, very important question. Uh, for me, I think currently at this field, there's a lot of controversies, a lot of debates, and a lot of tension. And a lot of them centers around, the concerns of student cheating, as you mentioned. Have they really, really acquired the learning goals that we as teachers, that we expect them to acquire? So for me, I would say the nexus, as an assessment researcher, I would say the nexus rests in the design of our assessment task. For example, if we give an assessment to students that's not in a supervised or completely closed setting, then I think we can assume that students, they will use AI in different ways, that there's no way for us to really check or verify, or I don't know if police is a right word here, but you get what I mean. Of course, we as teachers, we can tell students that, well, you're only supposed to use AI for brainstorming here, for formatting, for polishing, and then not for other purposes. But well, that's fine. but the concern number one is this is not enforceable because we don't really monitor how students use it. And concern number two, as I kind of mentioned in this presentation earlier, there's not always a clear line that we could, neatly categorize our AI use. So if there's so much confusion around the space, and then I think the trusting relationship between teachers and students, these would broke, and then students would have a lot of question marks in their head. So regarding this, I think at the moment, personally, I think the most balanced and workable way is to have structural changes and a program level assessment approach. And I would recommend the audience today to take a look at the work of Danny Liu from Sydney University. He's done some great work on program level assessment. I hope I'm not butchering his ideas here, but I think his main essence is that we need to consider assessment and the learning goals on a program level, and then we set several secure points where we insert these closely monitored supervised assessment points, either through exams or interactive orals, to ensure that these students, yes, they have really obtained these learning outcomes that we wish them to obtain from these programs. And then at the same time, we also have different kinds of open assessment, less supervised assessment that allow students to freely experiment with their AI use. So that would be an opportunity for them to learn about and then to safely experiment of how they could use AI to support their work. Yes, I think that's my thinking at the moment.
Thank you, Jess. I can see the hand by Ulana Pizzametsky, and then there are two questions in the chat room. So let's start with Ulana. Ulana, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, good.
Yeah.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you very much. This was a presentation of presentations because we are all facing these same questions, some more readily than others. But working as I do as an associate researcher with the Educational Informatics Lab at Ontario Tech University, we consider questions like this on a daily basis throughout the day. And I must say, I must return to human-computer interaction theory, an older theory, but it really has to do with human technological interaction, which posits that technology is an intellectual partner in human effort. And this is very helpful. It's, how shall we put it? It's a modern interpretation of the Socratic method. And in fact, we have educators who will assess the learning of their students by asking for examples of how the student has interacted with AI in the production of their work, some segment of it, to explicate the thinking process that that student went through before they began their work and once they completed it. And that falls into the category of alternative assessment, of formative assessment techniques. This way, I do believe, using or taking advantage of the range of techniques for assessment, the educator can be more fair and open, less distrusting, less policing, as the metaphor is here, the panopticon of education. And in fact, using creative assessment methodologies combats the transactional distance, which I think is one of the reasons we continue to have these disconcerting feelings about AI. The distance between the educator as the facilitator of learning and the student as the processor of learning. So those are just a few ideas from my end.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ulana. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly.
Yes.
Yes, thank you for your sharing. I do agree with you when you talk about we need to reposition and rethink the role of AI, and then you talk about this metaphor of AI as partners. And I think one of the very important message that I want to bring out from this presentation is also about language matters. The way we talk about AI and then the way we talk about assessment changes students and teachers' attitudes, their behaviors, their perceptions. If we only see AI as a inherent threat to students' work, then our students, they are very clever. They absorb that negativity very quickly, and they would have a long-term impact on how they do their work. And yes, I agree with you that the framing, the understanding, the conception, these are very important.
Thank you. We have 3 questions in the chat room, Jess. So maybe for Angelina, would you like to ask, or should I read myself? Just flexible, just can read it. Because for you,
yeah. I can try. I'm just not in a very quiet place, but I'll try. Thank you very much. I really liked the presentation and how clear it was. What I'm thinking is that we tend to expect originality from students of different levels and different ages. But as you mentioned in an earlier study, students back in the days might have been afraid of citing their sources because their work wouldn't be considered original. And I am assuming that maybe to some extent, expecting first-year students or even students in high school to produce absolutely original work might not be. I mean, they can, but I'm also thinking along the lines that first-year students are novice learners, while by the 4th year they're already able to ask meaningful questions. They're able to produce original work. So maybe in some sort of a defense of people who teach foundational courses, I can understand their fear, frustration with abusive use of AI. So it's not really a question, it's more like a thought that I thought maybe you'll have something to respond to that.
Right. Thank you, Angelina. I do think that originality is a very convoluted, very complicated concept. And when we talk about original work at different levels, people would have very different understanding. And as you said, very different expectation of what original work look like. For example, I think a lot of the part of the presentation, then when I talk about the validity of assessment, that's on the undergraduate level. But when we think about, PhD work, doctoral work in terms of originality, then we would really expect the students to produce at least some new insights and really new knowledge to this field rather than, simply citing other people's work. So yeah, I think I agree with you that when we talk about originality, it's such a complicated concept. And then with people in different disciplines teaching different levels of studies, they might have really different opinions regarding how they perceive this and how this can be enacted in practice.
Right. Yeah, just Justine, you have a question as well. Just the question. Yeah, just do you want to read your question?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Hello, Dr. Luo. Thank you for your insightful sharing. My question is, how can higher education institution reconstruct the evaluation criteria for students in academic originally to alleviate the dual anxiety of students and teachers in AI area?
Yes, thank you, Doris. Thank you. This is both an important and also a very difficult question. It's both a challenging question for me to answer. If I may, and then building on my previous slides on the validity of assessment, I think for me, one very important point is the permission to diverge. And I don't think it would be helpful to have a one-size-fits-all criteria or definition of originality when it comes to making rubrics. For example, as I mentioned earlier and building on Angelina's comment earlier, would academic originality, the definition of it, be entirely the same as the kind of academic originality that we expect from our undergraduate students? That might be different, right? When we talk about academic originality in for example, creative writing or literature studies, would that be the same as those in engineering or nursing or medicine? So we can imagine that these responses, these answers would be very different. So I think my answer to your question might be we may not have a one-size-fits-all definition of this, and we need this permission to diverge across context. I hope this helps.
Great. Okay. And Linda Chisholm,
yes,
online?
thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the presentation, which I found really, really fascinating. So my question is really just about returning to where you started. You started with a discussion about the originality statement required at the beginning of dissertations. So what do you think we should do with them? What's your approach to retaining them? Would you dispense with them? Would you modify them? And if so, how? Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Linda, for joining me in this webinar and then for this question. To be honest, recently I also had some very radical thoughts regarding, do we still need this concept anymore? Because previously when we think about originality and then, all these statements, originality is like an enshrined principle in higher education, and then we don't think much about it, and we unanimously agree this is a good thing, we should all obey it. But now with this AI, I think, as we discussed earlier, different people, we all have so different understanding of originality. We don't know anymore what we are signing. When we sign this, I have produced my original work. So my honest answer to you is yes, I've also been recently thinking, do we still need this concept anymore when this concept is no longer serving this purposes, but creating so much different understandings, and we all have so many different opinions regarding what it is.
All right, so I can see the discussion taking place in the chat room at the same time, but I previously I saw the hand from Ahmed Al-Sad. So Ahmed, would you like to ask?
Yes, thank you, the organizer. Thank you for the presenter. Thank you, Dr. Lee, for your presentation. I have a quick question to save the time. You see, I know AI is a new invention in the 20th century. It was not before, but with the development of the computers, the programming, we came up to this stage. I normally say that whatever AI, it is good for industry, it is good for everything, but still AI is a production of a human being. AI is not, you see, independent by itself. It was created by us. And artificial intelligence or AI will never replace a human intelligence. Now, my question is for the assessment and the validity, which is my area of specialization. If you use AI and come to invalid results or comes to invalid scoring of the students in their exams or even in the selection for a job like they do nowadays, they just scan the resumes with AI, you see, material, and then maybe come to wrong decisions. My question is, to what extent we can depend on AI in such applications? Thank you.
Yes, sorry if I may repeat your question. So you're curious about nowadays AI has invalid a lot of our assessment results, and then you are getting more worried and concerned that students' learning cannot be assured or verified. Is that correct? Or
yes, yeah, that's my point. Because you know the validity concept is the most important concept in assessment and evaluation.
Yes.
It is well established. Now I have a concern about the validity.
Yes, I'll come as soon as it's done. Okay.
Yes. I think my answer to this would be very similar to my responses to Anatoly earlier. For me, I do think at this moment, if we both want students to have the space to freely experiment with AI, but meanwhile, to make sure that we could verify their learning in our program, we do need more structural changes regarding our assessment design and the program level assessment design, as I mentioned earlier, where we set several secure points across our program where you could use interactive orals or exams to testify to make sure that the students have demonstrated the learning outcomes that you wish to see in your students. Meanwhile, we also have other more unsupervised and then open assessments that students could experiment with AI in their assignments. I think in that combination, hopefully, we could have not a perfect solution, but I would say a better solution in the current situation or scenario.
Mm-hmm. I can see a vivid discussion in the chat room, and that's like the beauty of being in the seminar, in the webinar, instead of watching it on YouTube afterward. But at the same time, yeah, it's great that you are all included and participate and ask and share your experiences. I see one question before we finish, because we're approaching pretty much the end of this webinar time, and I can see a question from Carol Chan asking about. Carol, are you online? Do you want to
Do
ask?
you want me to talk about a
Yeah.
question? Oh,
Yeah.
so thank you very much. It's really very insightful. My area is more from psychology and learning sciences, so we have the idea about co-construction. But anyway, I just want to ask you about the notion of AI as collaborator, not as tools. And then the process part is more because you did all kind of research. Do you know about the thing that people ask student to include the AI transcript? So you can use AI, but you show me your interaction with AI. I just want to know if you have those examples, and would that be some possible way? I also missed the name of the program, so I just asked you. But basically, the notion of collaborator that people talk about now, but could it work in an assessment context, and the notion of capturing process?
Thank you so much, Carol. Regarding your question about collecting students' transcript as we collect their assignments, I think that's for me as an assessment researcher, I think practically it would be very difficult for teachers, because you can imagine the workload if I teach like 100 students in my lecture, and then everyone submitted to me like 50 pages of chat records with AI, and how am I gonna process each line of this? And also, I think this would also invite new questions. So students would ask you, okay, Ms. Chen, I've submitted a chat record. How would this factor into your grading process? Would you actually look at my transcript, and what are some of the elements that you prioritize? So for me, I don't think that's a very practical or sustainable way when we think about collecting evidence.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm sorry to say that we have approached the end of this webinar. We are all excited about these questions, developments, and obviously you can see how vivid was the discussion in the chat rooms. So I thank you very much, Jess, for presenting your findings, sharing your papers. So I encourage everyone to read, send more questions to Jess, encourage her to do her wonderful work. We all need more insights. So thank you, Jess, and thank you everyone for your participation. So we look forward to your further contributions in the new webinars in the new year. So Happy New Year, everyone. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Anatoly, and thank you all for joining today's webinar. Thank you.